Hey, it's time for the Wednesday Word of the Week. This week's word is anomia, lawlessness. Let's jump right in. We're going to be looking in 1 John chapter 3 today. We're going to start with verse 4a, the first half of verse 4. In Koine it says, Pas ho poion tein hamartian kai tein anomian poie. So let's break it down. The first part, pas ho poion. Hopoion is a present active participle. Pas means any or every. And so here, hopoion, the one who does, anyone who does what? Tein hamartian, sin. Anyone who does sin, kai tein anomian poie, also, kai also here in this case, usually and, but in this case also, tein anomian poie, lawlessness does. So anyone who does sin, anyone who engages in sin, also engages or does lawlessness. So by using the present active participle, poion, it's showing habituality. This is something that's continual and ongoing. We're not talking about a one-time oopsie. We're talking about the perpetuation of a behavior, of an action. Anyone who does sin on the regular also does lawlessness. So it's a transitive verb, poieo, whether it's in the participle form or the indicative form at the end, poie. So it's talking about an action, an activity, not just an attitude, but an action or an activity. More than just thinking about it, but actually doing it. Let's finish up with verse 4b, where it says, Kai he hamartia estin he anomia. Kai and he hamartia, the sin, estin, he, she, or it is, in this case it, because we're talking about an abstract concept. Kai he hamartia estin, and sin is he anomia, lawlessness. Sin is lawlessness. So if you think back to your days in math class when you were in 5th grade, 4th, 5th, 6th grade, we're dealing with what we would call in math a convertible proposition, right? If A equals B, then B equals A. They're convertible. They're the same thing because there's an equivocator in the middle. They're equal. So what's the equivocator here? Estin, the verb to be, estin. So if sin is lawlessness, convertible proposition, lawlessness is sin. So hamartia, if we think back to previous episodes and your basic knowledge of Koine vocabulary, hamartia is sin in the sense of missing the mark. Not parabasis, transgression, trespass, but missing the mark. So all missing the mark, all of that kind of sin is lawlessness. It's which anomia, lawlessness, can have two basic meanings. The first one being the absence of law. So is hamartia the absence of law? Well, it's kind of hard to break a law that isn't there, that doesn't exist, right? The second meaning for anomia is a disregard for, a disrespect of, or a rebellion against law. Well, remember, poieo, the verb in the first half, was transitive. It had to do with action. So if you are engaging in disregard, rebellion against, or disrespect for law, that sounds a little more action, a little more transitive than the absence of law, right? So where do we get this notion from? Well, nomos, law. Anomia is the rejection of the law, the rebellion against the law. Nomos comes from a much, much older word, nemo, which means to allot, to part out. And so the law, the nomos, is what someone has nemained, to part out, to allot. What is allotted? What is allowed? That's what we think of as law, right? How fast am I allowed to drive on this road? 45? Okay, well, if I decide to drive 55, I'm engaging in anomia. I'm rejecting that law and establishing my own law. So nomos, law, from nemos, is a significant term. If we think to the Septuagint, the Greek translation of the Hebrew Old Testament, virtually every occurrence of the word Torah, law, is translated nomos in the Septuagint. It's by the time we get to the New Testament period, the first century, nomos has almost exclusively sort of a cultic application. It's law in a religious sense, in a moral sense, not in a civil sense. The extra-biblical world has taken up other vocabulary to deal with law, particularly because they've gone through, the Roman Empire has gone through the Republic phase and into emperors, and now law is not a codified body of what's allotted and what isn't. It's the dictates of a man, of an emperor, or of a king. Law is an important term in the New Testament. John uses the word nomos 14 times. Luke uses it 9 times. Matthew uses it 8 times. Interestingly, Mark doesn't use it at all. And it's peppered throughout the epistles. It's law is an important concept and term in the New Testament. So anomia, right, the lawlessness, is either the absence of law that we've discussed, and there are places in the New Testament where it is used to describe the absence of law, but here in this passage today, it's the rejection of law. So in verse 4, the context seems to make it clear through the use of the transitive verb poieo, pardon my nose scratch, that it can't be the absence of law, it's the rejection of law. I used to ask in my pastoring days, I used to ask people while studying Scripture, at what age did you decide to teach your kids to sin? And that usually got a laugh, because anyone who's been around little kids knows you don't need to teach them to rebel against the law. Whatever law it may be, if it's no cookies till after supper, if it's bedtime is 7 o'clock, no matter what the rule is, you can't hit your little brother, you can't hit your little sister. No matter what the rule is, kids have this tendency to rebel against it. Parabasis, stepping over a line knowingly, is one thing, but hamartia, this sort of failure to hit the mark, this inborn sinful nature that just bows up against authority and rules and law and wants to do its own thing, seems to be about the most basic manifestation of sinful human nature. I do what I want to do. So, sin and lawlessness, convertible proposition. Sin is lawlessness, therefore lawlessness is sin. And that's kind of the bad news that we all face, this sort of from our earliest days, rebellion against the law. But there's good news. The thrust, the theme of the New Testament is that there's something else in us that is convertible. And we don't have to be solely subject to the hamartia, the sinful human nature with which we were born. So I hope that was good for you. It was good for me. Please hit like, subscribe, share, all that good stuff. And until next time, charis kai reine humine, grace and peace to you.